My cousin's wedding was always planned as the event of the century in our family. The ballroom was decorated with thousands of white orchids. The scent of expensive champagne filled the air, and the laughter of hundreds of guests created an atmosphere of pure joy. However, amidst that sea of elegance, I began to feel a pang of anxiety. I decided to leave the dance floor, seeking some fresh air in the side corridors of the old colonial building where the reception was being held. It was there, among the shadows of the marble columns and the distant echo of the orchestra, that the official event photographer intercepted me in a way that chilled me to the bone. He was a short man, almost insignificant next to the formally dressed guests, but his gaze held a disturbing intensity. He cornered me against a wall in a completely deserted hallway. Without introducing himself, without a professional smile, he blurted out a question that struck me as inappropriate and aggressive. "Do you have a boyfriend?" I felt the air grow heavy. I tried to keep my composure, thinking he was probably just some guy with zero social skills trying to pick me up at the worst possible moment. In a curt but polite tone, I told him I was single, but that my mind was 100% focused on my career and that I had absolutely no interest in looking for anyone. Instead of backing away in embarrassment, the photographer had a reaction that left me paralyzed. He raised his heavy DSLR camera and held it inches from my nose, blocking my view of the world. The flash went off repeatedly, momentarily blinding me. In that instant of confusion and white spots dancing in my eyes, my mind screamed, "Danger." I demanded he leave me alone, my voice cracking with anger and fear, and I bolted back toward the light of the main hall. But the horror had only just begun. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him. I wasn't photographing the cake, or the bride and groom, or the toast. His lens was fixed, obsessively, solely on my movements. I suppose my face reflected absolute panic, because that's when he approached me again, taking advantage of a moment when I was alone near the bar. In a desperate whisper, he told me he needed to be alone with me, and that he had something vital to show me on his camera. To me, it sounded like a predator's invitation to its lair. My survival instinct kicked in. I ran to the women's restroom, locked the door, and leaned against the cold tile, trying to calm the pounding heart in my throat. My trembling hands pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The messages appeared in green, bouncing off the thick walls of the building, which blocked the signal. I waited 20 minutes, praying that the guy had grown tired of his perverse game. But when I came out, my heart sank. He stood there, motionless as a statue, waiting for me by the bathroom door. Before I could yell for a security guard, he turned his camera's digital screen toward me. My stomach lurched at the sight, a photograph of the inside of a dark van parked in the back alley of the salon. Rolls of duct tape, thick nylon rope, and a bundle of zip ties were clearly visible on the floor. "It's for you," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. My knees buckled. The man I'd considered a freak had just shown me, in my interpretation, the kit he planned to use to kidnap me. Desperate and with my vision blurred by tears, I managed to reach Trevor, one of my oldest friends and a guy who practically lived at the gym. Trevor was nearly 6'3" and pure muscle. Seeing him there, perched on the bar, was like seeing a beacon of hope. I clung to his arm and, between sobs, begged him to help me escape, that the photographer was a psychopath who had a van ready to take me away. Trevor immediately stood up, wrapping me in a protective embrace and assuring me that no one would touch me while he was there. The feeling of relief was immense, but it didn't last long. The photographer entered the bar shortly after, defying all logic. Despite the enormous physical difference, he stood in front of Trevor and demanded he let me go. Trevor laughed with an arrogance that at the time seemed heroic to me. "Who do you think you are?" Trevor asked, placing a hand on his chest to push him away. But the photographer didn't move. His gaze darted from Trevor to me with an urgency bordering on madness. In a sudden movement, the photographer tried to snatch the wine glass I was holding. Convinced it was his last attempt to attack me, I threw the contents directly in his eyes, cursing him as Trevor shoved him back. It was at that moment that the world began to spin. A violent dizziness hit my head, and I felt my legs turn to jelly. I collapsed onto the bar as my senses faded. The last thing I saw was Trevor trying to rush me out of there as the guests began to surround us after the first dance. My brother arrived at that moment, alerted by the commotion. I heard Trevor say, in a now strangely calm voice, that I hadn't felt well and that he would take me home. However, the photographer, his face still wet from my drink, didn't give up. Shouting, he managed to get the attention of my brother and the security guard, showing them the sequence of photos on his camera. They weren't photos of me, but evidence of the crime. Clear images of Trevor pouring a white powder into my drink while I was talking to someone else, and photos of the van that, as the police later discovered, belonged to Trevor, not the photographer. The photographer had been stalking me to protect me, trying to keep me from drinking from that glass, and keeping an eye on the real monster hiding behind my best friend. Thanks to his persistence and his courage in confronting someone twice his size, Trevor was arrested that same night, and today I can tell this story from the safety of my home.